If I could grow only one fruit in my garden, it would be a fig. And I think figs suffer from a lot of misconceptions. Gardeners don't realise just how easy they are. They are called the lazy man's fruit because you can grow them with virtually doing no work at all. And the reason you want to grow them is because if you buy a fig from a store, they pick them when they're 50% ripe. That way they're much easier to transport like that without being damaged. But when they're 50% ripe, they have 50% less flavours, 50% less sugar. They're just not a patch on it. And I think you can do so much with figs. My very best fig dish, apart from figs and parma ham, is my daughter Unity, who's behind the cameras, recipe for fig and cardamon pavlova, and it's to die for. Anyway, so I'm going to debunk a lot of these misconceptions. In my hand, I have Little Miss Figgy, which is a variety of fig which is supposedly a dwarf variety, but I'll show you in my polytunnel in a minute. It's meant to only go up to something like 5 foot high, I think, or 1.2 meters, and you'll see mine is a fair bit higher. But anyway, I'm growing my figs in USDA zone 8, and supposedly you can get down to -10, minus fig with a, you can get down to -10, -15 degrees centigrade growing figs outside. And then, so in most of the UK you can do that, but just bear in mind that in places like Chicago that are far, far colder, they still grow figs. They have ways and means to get them through the winter. So what I'm going to do is, because I'm trying to spread my fig season and produce more figs, I've taken lots of fig cuttings, and this one here, Little Miss Figgy, and then I'm going to grow one in a pot in each of the greenhouse, and this is the dwarfing fig, a couple in the polytunnel, then I grow them against the south-facing wall, and I grow about 5 or 6 like that, and that way I have a good range of figs. I think the reason that people don't like figs is because they think they grow just too massive. Come and see a fig now that I've grown against the south facing wall that I've just radically hacked back because it did get too big. When you plant your fig, you want to get as much sun, as much warmth as you can to ripen them. And so you plant them against the south facing wall. Now I probably planted this fig maybe 40 years ago, and I made the big mistake. I planted brown turkey. This variety is sold everywhere in the UK, but it's not the best. There are far better ones which I've subsequently grown, like Desert King, and possibly Little Miss Figgy. White Marseille I want to grow. But there are so many varieties, well over 300. I have no idea why brown turkey is the one that dominates the nurseries in the UK. Well, one reason that people don't grow figs is because they grow so large. And I planted against the single story bit of the house because this is the main south facing wall we've got. But the thing is, it gets so big, so I just hack it back. Now you don't have to prune figs at all. You could just let them grow. If you've got the space, and you could just let them grow into a big, big bush, and that would be fine. You might need to remove some of the foliage to get sun to the fruit to ripen it, but it would be absolutely fine. But people do say really complicated fig pruning regimes, and I don't totally subscribe to them. Now, one of the easiest ways that I like to grow them is as a standard. So you just have the upright trunk, so you pull off all the side shoots. And with some of mine that I'm putting in the tunnel in the greenhouse, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to take up one leader and I'm going to pull off all the side shoots. So it's very easy to control in a greenhouse or a polytunnel, or if you want to move it outside if it's in a pot. So this one, when I hacked it back heavily in the autumn, you see I've kept some of the main heavy ones, and that is probably the way to do it, is to cut back the old heavy branches every so often so that you're maintaining and restricting the size. And I haven't done enough of this. I also haven't done enough of the pruning now, which I will do after this, is to go and cut back a lot of these shoots that are producing vegetative growth. Now we've got all these bits of long vegetative growth because I cut it back. So when you cut something back heavily, it goes whoosh, and you get the vegetative growth, and you get then very wide gap between the nodes and you don't get a lot of fruit. So what I'm aiming for is to have a fig forming at each node. You can see we've got that here, and there are short distance between the nodes because this is last year's growth, you see. And I'm going to now I'm going to cut off that just to let the sun get to the fruit and to restrict the vegetative growth. I'm going to cut back all this long vegetative growth fairly shortly now, just to let more sun get into the fruit. So in springtime you will have these tiny little buds that are about, fruiting buds, which are about the size of your little fingernail, that sort of size, really tiny. And ideally what you do is you keep those, but then you cut back the growth just beyond those little buds. That's in spring when they start to grow. Then you let it grow 4 or 5 leaves again, and then you cut back to that point again. So that what happens then is it makes it produce energy into the fruit rather than into this vegetative growth. Now I rarely get round to doing that, and as you see I've still got a pretty good crop. So because I don't have a lot of time, I tend not to do these things that you're meant to do, but I'm still getting fruit. Now the other thing that you're meant to do is with fruits they have the Breba crop, B-R-E-B-A, which is what we usually have in the UK. They say that some figs, like Little Miss Figgy, will produce your main crop as well, but I'm a little bit sceptical about that. And the Breba crop is the ones that are formed on the last year's wood. So the darker wood, at the end of the year, you'll see these tiny little fruits on them, fruiting buds that are about the size of a pin, a matchstick head, something like that. And those are the ones that will then ripen. These are the Breba crop here, that ripen in the year. And so those are the ones that we will be picking in the UK mainly. And so what you're meant to do is pick off any of the bigger fruits, bigger than the size of a matchstick head, during the winter, so that they don't put energy into those, because those will not really overwinter in our climate. They'll freeze off or drop off, or they won't expand. But again, I've never got round to doing that because I just don't have the time to go around picking all those out. I'm doing other things like mulching and stuff in the winter. So therefore, you want to get a variety that produces a good Breba crop, and that, as I say, Desert King is my favourite. But then I haven't had White Marseille, which a lot of people say is amazing. And then Little Figgy, maybe that will be coming up trumps. So this is one fruit tree I've got here, and it's just growing against the wall. And now come and see a couple of others I've got up here. So here I've got my standard linnet, which I grew from a standard. I've got my lovely pomegranate tree here, which my son gave me. And then in between, in a baseless pot, I've just put another pot there, and I'm going to put a fig in that baseless pot. And that's going to be interesting because I think it will be able to get enough moisture by getting its roots down into the ground, so I won't have to water it so much. If you've got a fig in a pot, you're going to have to give it a lot of water. They are thirsty, demanding plants, so you're going to have to give them, I would say, at least 2 gallons a week in the UK, if not more. So therefore I like to grow them in the baseless pot. Now the disadvantage is that in a baseless pot they will grow much bigger than if you just have them in a pot. I mean, they always used to say grow figs in something that restricts the roots, and that stops them growing so big. But I actually don't subscribe to that. I would rather just heavily lop off those big limbs and restrict the growth that way, rather than restricting them below ground. So I'm going to have one in the baseless pot there. I've got another one up there, which was a variety that some nurseries sent me, with very stripy fruits. I can't remember what it is, but all I can say is it's a miserable specimen. Look at it. It has very few leaves on it, and it's always been like that. It is grown in a pot, and maybe I don't give it quite enough feed and water as I should do. But I'm going to try actually taking it out of that pot, putting it in the ground and seeing if it does better somewhere. But it does need, in my climate, to ripen them enough, bearing in mind it's the UK East Midlands. I need a south-facing wall, I need as much sun as I can get, or I need it in a polytunnel, or in a greenhouse. Otherwise, I might get the odd fruit ripening or some fruit ripening on a cool summer. But if I want more reliability, then obviously the added bonus of having the south-facing wall behind it, radiating heat out, makes all the difference in the world. So this is a little fig cutting. Now this is Desert King, and it's in a baseless pot. It's against the south-facing wall. I'm going to have to hack my vine quite a bit. I've let this grow too much. But I think this will be really nice here, and I'll grow it up as a standard. As you can see, it's just got one thing. I'll grow it up, I'll let it form about here, remove the vine or keep the vine pruned back, and then it will be a lovely standard, which forms a nice bit by the entrance to go through into my little wall garden. This is little Miss Figgy, obviously in the polytunnel, and this was a mutation of Violette de Bordeaux. And you can see it's got quite characteristic sort of finer, more tongued leaves. Now, some people say this is just a marketing ploy and it's not actually that much dwarf or different, but they say it grows to 1.2 meters high. I think we've outdone that already, but I do like the way it's cropping very nicely. At every nodal joint pretty much we've got a fig. I'm going to do some heavy cutting. I'm going to cut off all past the fruiting wood. I'm going to give it a lot of water because this container isn't baseless and it does need a lot of water. And I'm hoping, because of the extra heat in the polytunnel, now this polytunnel in the winter, it will be as cold as it is outside, obviously, because it doesn't actually insulate it that well. But it does give me the chance to wrap the pot if I thought it was going to go below -15. This is meant to be hardy to -15 degrees centigrade. But I don't think I can't remember it getting much below that very often, just very occasionally. But it does mean that it heats up massively. The temperature in here, you know, it's like the south of France often in here in March and April. It just really keeps up the heat levels and the sun. And so that is why I'm hoping to get a much better crop inside. Now, one thing that you must know about figs, when you're pruning them or cutting them in the bright sunlight, it can cause a massive skin reaction. There she is touching the fig, but it's not very hot and sunny now, it's pretty cloudy. But I have had it that I've been playing with the figs and then the next day I'm just completely covered in blisters, which are really quite repellent. And I remember going to the pharmacy once and the pharmacy man had hysterics and he looked at my arms and said, "You've got to go and see the GP now. I'll take you in there now." And he really thought I was going to get sepsis or something nasty. But anyway, don't let that put you off. Just wear gloves and don't be stupid like I am. So I've got all these cuttings of her, and she's meant to taste very nice indeed. They're very easy from cutting, so that's the other thing. So if I wanted to do some now, I would just cut that off there, just below a node as usual. They're quite leafy, so I'd probably remove that leaf, cut those in half. I propagate them in my hydropod type propagators, and they root in about 2 or 3 weeks. If you don't have that, what I used to do is, before I got that, is I used to just take the cuttings, put them in the fridge for a few week or so, and then I would put them into a gritty compost in the greenhouse or somewhere, maybe with a bag on the top, poly bag. I didn't always bother, and they root pretty easily. They take a lot longer like that, and I would usually take them in sort of June, July, August, September, that sort of time. But they are easy to root, but in the hydropod they are so fast, which is lovely. And so I'll have these ones, because they're dwarf, in the greenhouses, which just makes it easier. So what else should I tell you about figs, really? Fertiliser, a lot of people use slow release fertiliser, something like Osmocote, so they just put that on each year. So the fruit are very good for you. They're high in polyphenols and antioxidants. The peel is particularly good, and high fibre. And we all need lots of fibre in our diet, and we're very bad at that. And of course they taste delicious. So they've been grown in the UK. The first known record of them was in 1552, I think it was. So that's way back. And when you think it was significantly colder then than it is now, I think if you can and you like figs, really forget the fact about the complicated pruning. They are easiest trees in the world to grow. They don't have to be huge, especially when you've got varieties like Little Miss Figgy, which hopefully is a wee bit dwarfer. They can withstand huge depths of cold, and if you're not in the UK and you go below -15, then you might want to consider growing them in pots or else in the ground. And what they do when they grow them in the ground is they just cut the roots off around the plant on one side, bend the plant over, and then they mulch it heavily. And that way they're growing them in New York, Chicago and other places. And sometimes they even dig really deep trenches and put them in the trench. You cannot bring them into a conservatory because they do need that cold winter dormancy. So a conservatory would be too warm. How do you know when your figs are ripe? I mean, some people say when they start to crack and things like that, but no, the real way is the neck. So when you've got the neck of the fruit, which is that, not the stalky bit, but the actual neck, when that is ripe, which hopefully it will be in a few months' time, that will be slightly soft, that will be nice and soft. And then you obviously want to get them before the birds get them or whatever. Some people actually net them in bags to stop ants and things getting at them, but I just keep an eye on them and pick them when they're ready. So that's the best thing to test for their ripeness. So enjoy figs, forget all the stuff that you've heard about them and just try growing them yourself. Really easy, really delicious. Enjoy.